So, this one's called Mike. Faced towards the castle wall, he peered at short distance, glasses thicker than the ice cubes in his Jack Daniels chaser. A swan vesta of a man in light wood clothes, a red beanie on his head even in the summertime. 61 but more like 80, a man who once had shone so brightly, slowly burning out. He loved to talk of former times, Aldermaston, Grosvenor Square, the festival on the Isle of Wight, with Hendrix playing there in his acid trip through life. I never knew his last name, until he died alone one rainy day in April, in a cardboard box, in a Bedford van. He turned up late for his burial, in the Bluebell Wood. Llangefni Beach. We sat within the castle shade and watched the tide go out. We heard the cries of seagulls and the coo-coos of pigeons scrambling for bits and pieces of discarded chips and fish. While from the sky above us a red kite fluttered down, as a grandad and his grandson tried and failed to launch the toy once more. Across the estuary, the two-tone klaxon announced the fishcard train rounding the headland. From that distance it was a miniature train set, remembered from my 00 scale youth. And I told you then that when I lived away for all those years, it was at that point I really knew I was coming home. And I told you there that I had never felt so at home as when I held you in my arms and gazed into your eyes, samphire green, just washed by the ebbing tide. Suddenly the sound was drowned as two hawks descended from the waning sun, killing machines, destroying the tranquility, anachronistically attacking the ruined castle. And I told you then that as a boy I had harboured dreams of joining the RAF, was a member of the Air Training Corps. You said, in another generation and another land, it would have been the Hitler Youth. This one's called Burn. The melting conflagration led to my disintegration and the trial of devastation from a minuscule combustion. I awoke and was a blistered slab of meat upon the butcher's table and screaming for my mother. Maxed out on morphine, it did not assuage the pain. I saw my burnt out scorching thigh pulsating through the cellophane. I stood before the mirror then to find I'd been erased. My fingerprints were not my own, and neither was my face. Night time. I lie in the darkness, naked and unslaked, my body melting, sweltering in the cool blue crystal glow of the nighttime radio. Your softly spoken snoring gnaws away adoringly into my fatigue. Your every exhalation a cooling consolation on my back. The alcoholic. When drunkenly I got back home to her, pretending that I had not drunk at all, I could not hide my stumbling or my slur, or tripping over on dust balls in the hall. I ran through the excuses well rehearsed, and promised yet again there'd be no more of wasted afternoons lining the purse of landlords who all viewed me as a bore. I said I'd never drink again, do anything you wanted if you'd stay. I know how drink has ruined many men and driven them to terminal decay. And now, as I lay prostrate on the floor, I swear to you I'll not drink any more.
Alkoholisten. När jag var full och fick hopp om henne och sluddrande sa att jag blivit nykter, jag kunde inte dölja snubbel, öppet spänne och föll i hallens damm i undanflykter. Försvara ursäkt nog övats in, aldrig i soffan brakade än en gång och återlovat aldrig någonsin. För stora hyresvärden kall och vrång. Jag sa att jag dricker aldrig mer igen och gör vad som helst om du blir kvar. Jag vet att drinkar ruinerat många män och drivit oss till slutligt förvar. Och nu, jag ligger raklång på ditt golv. Jag svär att aldrig mera sluta håll.
Wow. Mexican standoff. It happens sometimes. 3 cars coincide at the mini roundabout. A moment of mutual indecision slows down time when one false move makes 3 cars collide. My eyes dart back and forth from his to hers to his again, all indicating right, waiting for someone to blink. Morricone plays on the car radio, the soundtrack to this scene. Right revving foot, trigger finger, breath mists upon the screen. I make a move, they are slow to respond. At the static mini roundabout, time speeds up again, shifting. Like binary stars, we used to dance a seductive twist, codependent around a common point, always together but never quite touching. You were the brighter, and I always secondary. Now I stand here, still, burning out, your red shifting away. Bird song. I have taken birds for granted all my life, and now I have migrated north to summer in Scandinavia. I listen. When the whistling wind, which rustles and whispers gently through the sleepy, weeping willow, takes a breath, when the boisterous blare of a passing, roaring freight train fades away and there is silence, I listen. The insidious birdsong perches uneasily on my ear. This is not the summer soundtrack I am used to. It is different and discordant and sounds all wrong. As alien to me as I am to Tranås in Sweden. I see these birds and I am the imposter. We never see these birds at home. And I listen. I can name some, a lapwing maybe, or a peewit. But I miss the blackbirds and the thrushes and the pigeons. And then there is the solitary magpie.
For in about a month, Anthony Jones have been visiting Tranås in Sweden to get his first poetry book translated into Swedish. Now, how have you experienced Sweden so far?
Oh, well, my experience of Sweden has been informed by my visit here last year. Last year I was very lucky that a few of the original applicants from the Dylan Thomas International Writers Residency here in Tranås, the people who'd been originally accepted for the residency had dropped out, unfortunately for them, but it was my gain, because it meant that I was able to come as a substitute writer on that residency, and there I met some great people with a great cultural scene going on in Tranås, all working towards a similar goal of bringing art out into the wider public and making it accessible to everybody, and very much opening its arms to any artists who want to come around. And so I had a great time then, and I was really pleased when the publisher Magnus Gren approached me in September following the workshop last summer, the residency last summer, inviting me to be published by him with Peter Nieberg, who's the guy behind the camera incidentally, who's just introduced me, a popular poesy. He would be translating my work, and it was of course very exciting. This is going to be my first poetry collection, with the added bonus that it's bilingual. It'll be in Swedish and English, and of course that's very exciting and appealing. So when the offer came to come back as a resident this time round, I leapt at it. It was a perfect opportunity to come here again, meet up with friends again, make new friends, and carry on the unfinished business of last year. So I came knowing that I'd be working with Peter very closely. If you're going to be doing translation work, what better than the writer and the translator actually sitting beside each other and not doing things as we had been planning to do over the internet, I suppose by Skype or email or whatever. It would have been a less organic process. And during the course of the process, I think I might be going off track, but during the course of the translation process, it's opened up so many areas of discussion. What is translation? How does it work? How does a language like English, with a huge vocabulary because of the influences that historically Britain has had, compared with Sweden with a much smaller vocabulary, how can that possibly be translated into something similar or like, or sounding the same, with the same music or not the same music? How can it be translated into the idiom of a different tongue?
Can you give an example for
well,
difficulties in the translation?
We came across a word in one of my poems where the word burial had been debated, the word burial over funeral. And you told me that really there was no word for, there was no distinction between the two in Swedish. So we define a burial as the act of saying goodbye to somebody, where the funeral is actually the rite, the religious rite, if you like, of saying goodbye. But there's no distinction. So there's an example of how two English words can only be translated into one Swedish word, as I understand it anyway.
Yeah. Do you see any themes? You in your book there are in about 20 poems.
Yes.
Do you see any themes between them? Any
in my themes? Oh yeah, my themes?
motives?
I think one of the things I do like to write is about breakups. I'm very aware there's not a lot of humour in my poems, although there is some line there if you look hard enough. I think they kind of come out of sort of sadness and melancholia, and they're written in sometimes very dark places. So there was a theme of breakups, and one of the things I like to do in poetry is to set up a scene which is maybe a simple sort of observational motif, and then to undermine it towards the end by making a more general human truth. That's what I'm aspiring to do in many of my poems. I'm not sure whether I succeed or not. That's not up to me in the end, that's up to the reader or the listener, because once the book will be published in September the 4th or 5th, I believe, I'll plug that.
Tell me a little about where you were growing up.
Oh, right. I was brought up in a small market town in Wales. It's quite a historical place. It's called Carmarthen, or in Welsh, Caerfyrddin. It's a historical place. It's at one time it was the capital of Wales. It was the major way of bringing things from the sea into Britain in certain cases, and there was a constant flow of trade coming up from the Mediterranean. So Phoenicians came to our house, our town, and it was one of the furthest westernmost points of the Roman Empire. Just down the way from where I live are the remains of an amphitheatre. Sadly, it's not used for any performance anymore. It would be lovely to have outdoor theatre or any kind of event in that space, because that's what it was designed for, after all. The part of the world I come from is southwest Wales, and Henry VII, on arriving to take over the country in the end, if you like, arrived via South Wales and approached that way into Wales. We're not far from Ireland, so it's quite easy to get the local ferry from Fishguard to Rosslare. We're not miles away from the M4 motorway, the mail motorway, which goes from London to South Wales. So there's possibilities to get to other places, but really it's a small town. It's based on agriculture and local hospital, and it's the administrative capital of Carmarthenshire.
Do you think it's important for your poetry?
I think by its very nature it informs my work. When I was a child, all I ever really wanted to do was escape Carmarthen. It wasn't a very exciting place to be brought up in, and we were interested in the bright lights of London and where other bands were playing, and there was a lot more happening. We wanted more stimulus. It was a common goal amongst me and my friends. We couldn't wait to go away. And when I did finally get away, it was to Oxford Polytechnic, now Oxford Brookes University. I spent 10 really happy years there, and I never really anticipated ever coming home. And for my sins, I didn't often return home when I was there. But situation dictated that I had to come back. So I settled back in first for my mother, and then later on with a short marriage and now a long-term partnership, and I'm very happy. So it's strange coming back to a place as an adult, if you like, and returning to it and finding that really nothing much has changed. It's a great town in many ways. I wouldn't decry it to anybody, but there's still not a lot happening, and it kind of can get frustrating. There are pockets of real great interest. There's a good place which puts gigs on. There's a poetry event which we run in one of the local pubs. It's called Poems and Pints at the Queen's. We brought a version of that last year to Tranos, and now I'm happy to say it's still going and thriving as Pilsner Poesy in the Store Garden in Tranos, the main street. So that's great too.
How did Poetry and Pints start?
How did it start?
Yeah.
I was on the MA programme of creative writing in Trinity St David's University, and part of that course was to put out an anthology of work by the students as a sort of introduction to the process, the matter-of-fact process of publishing, and to get a document of what had happened during our collective time there. So the university paid for the publication of the book and the print run and the production costs, but we had 6 launch events planned, and we didn't have any money to buy the things that go along with launch events, wine and cheese effectively. So in order to raise money for that, we held an event called Poems and Pints. It was taken from a 70s a BBC Wales programme by the same title, which had the same format. It was set in a pub with people standing up to read poetry. So we had one just to raise money for that, and then we thought, hey, this wasn't too bad at all, let's try it again. And we tried it again and again, and we started doing it every month. And I'm very pleased to say it's been going for 5 years now. We celebrated that recently, and we're now in our 6th year, and it's thriving.
When do you first get in contact with poetry?
Oh, that was at school. I have to say that poetry in school just baffled me. We did the sort of usual stuff that you do, the lyrical ballads. I believe we did that. The collaboration between, well, the joint publication between Coleridge and Wordsworth, and it just seemed opaque to me. The only thing that really stuck out and I really liked about that was the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. That was an astonishing piece, and that was the first thing I noticed. As this is really interesting, and the language that's used in there is fascinating. I noticed that phrases that we take for granted, which I'd had in common practice and quotations, were found in some of these great poems. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink is one of the quotations from that. It's a couplet, and that's in the common sort of English mindset, if you like. So that was the first one that sort of appealed to me. But it was really the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, which I think was a major breakthrough for a lot of people. It's a cornerstone, a milestone in the history of poetry. It's the first modern poem. That's how it's talked about by some. It's been well studied, and there have been lots of books written about it. So it's a great poem, and because it allowed ordinary language to be used in poetry, and in that respect it freed it up for the generations of writers to come, and instantly made it much more accessible to someone like me, who was frankly baffled by the old speak and the old words of the seemingly opaque meanings of things like Shakespeare. And it was studied. It was taught, I think, in a very backward way. We weren't exposed to that much theatre. I remember going to see a version of Macbeth in a local, the nearest city to me, and I remember seeing the Polanski's version of Macbeth. Oh, now I come to think of it as well, I was staying with a friend in Aberystwyth, which is a university town about 40 or 50 miles up the coast. And there happened to be a version of Julius Caesar on there, so we went to see that as well, because that was one of the ones we'd studied for school. I can quote extensively from the ones we studied at school, partly because of familiarity, but partly because you kind of had to learn long tracts of it to put in your essays. So it was a lot of learning by rote in the examinations that we took.
So, let's hear a little bit about the first poem that you write.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
The pamphlet.
Yes. Oh, well. What happened was, in my teens, I messed about with bands, silly bands, really. Looking back on it, I think all the people who got involved with that would have liked to have carried it further than which they had. Hey, we went the maybe the traditional way that we were expected to go. So I had my own microphone. I had my rock and roll dreams. They weren't really on the cards. So my brother actually started writing a bit of poetry, and I sort of picked up on that, and I thought I'd copy that. So it wasn't even that wasn't the original idea, because my brother influenced me to do it. I didn't really read what he was writing, nor did he read my writing. My father's business had closed, and we were left with all this stationery with the letter heading of the business, the name and address of the business, the logo. So I took DL envelopes so big like that, and I just wrote poems on those, and then I assembled them into pages. I actually got my mum to pay for the printing from a local publisher, publishers called VG Logics, a big name in Carmarthen, they took their printers. And so 100 were produced. I stapled them together. I set up a book launch and in a local pub. There was a separate room in a local pub. I held a launch event for that. And I sold all the copies, in the same way that some people sell raffle tickets in work. People were buying it because it was mine, and it was fun. That's when I started anyway. But I've been returning to it since. I don't actually have a copy of my own. A friend sent me a facsimile through over email, and you can then see there that the current style of my writing hasn't really changed that much. I still find myself with the same voice, the same poetic voice, which is interesting to see. And the themes are very similar as well. So the things that concerned me then are still the same old hang-ups and troubles I've got with the world. And they really haven't changed much. It's interesting from that point of view as an artifact, a document of where I am. But to pick up further where I picked up writing, I'd always kind of scribbled around with words, thinking more in terms of song lyrics. Always this idea that I might go back to maybe collaborating with somebody, writing some songs again, because my musical expertise is very limited. But I know I've always had a flair with words. People say I'm quite articulate and eloquent and have a good vocabulary, etc. And I'm quite good at punning and all those sort of silly things that you do with language. And then, by chance, sheer chance, there became one evening class which started in Carmarthen, which was creative writing. I went to it, and we had a fantastic inspirational person teaching us. His name is Claire Ferguson Walker, a key person in my life. And she's having her own success now in poetry and other things. But she encouraged me, and when I decided then that I would apply for this MA Creative Writing programme in the local university, which I knew was quite prestigious anyway, it encouraged me to do that, take that leap of faith. And to my surprise, actually, I was accepted, and I was delighted to be accepted and welcomed in by this amazing community. Again, more influential people, the Welsh poet and writer Menna Elfyn, the celebrated poet and writer Menna Elfyn, is director of that course, and she welcomed me into this community and encouraged me. Likewise, a tutor on that course, Jenny Williams, and the overseeing director of the whole body in that university, Paul Wright. These names must be named. From there, and pursuing other pursuits, literary pursuits, with a community interest company we set up, 4 of us. If I don't mind, I'll name those as well. Claire Scott, Annie Bell Davis, myself, and Dominic Williams, who's known to people at Fanos very well. We set up a community interest company called Write for Word, and we've been establishing ourselves, doing other things with the community, and we now give workshops with groups in the community, in particular we have done work with groups whose clients are either drug or alcohol dependent, and that's a really very rewarding strand of the stuff that we do as a community interest company. So my writing has progressed, and so have my wider interests in the locale of Carmarthen and beyond. There's a really booming spoken word scene in our area of Wales now, as there is all over the country now. It's a very exciting time to be a performing writer.
Yeah. What do you think is the role of poetry in society, in a large scale?
Oh.
Do it have some kind of role, or is it?
I think think you have to take poetry for what it is. It certainly doesn't have the impact in society as it may be used to in the heady days of maybe Eliot and Larkin and those big weight name poets, when poetry was more widely consumed. It wasn't unusual for books of poetry to sell many units. Now it's more niche. There are a lot of poets out there. A lot of poets are getting published. A lot of poets now are just bypassing the whole publishing procedure altogether and getting into ebooks or self-publishing. It's easy and relatively cheap to do. I don't know many poets who make a living as poets. It's a very rare thing indeed. Most poets tend to be in teaching, I think, and other charitable maybe organisations or from any walk of life. The role of poetry in society, it's to comment, it's to, in certain places, rebel or even revolt. I know refugee poets who see their role as quite different in their society than I might in mine. But I think art can't exist in a vacuum. It has to be informed by what goes on in your immediate environment and what goes on in the world around you and beyond. So there is definitely a role for society, for poets in society. If that weren't the case, then why would dissident poets spend years in exile or in jail or worse?
Would you want your poetry to be in a broader context?
In a broader context, I'd kind of like that kind of thing. But you have to know your own current limitations. My writing, I think, is quite naive. I think it's quite simple. It's purposely simple. I want to make it as accessible to as many people as possible. And I think we found in our translation process it's made it easier for you. But I don't seek mass appeal. I don't seek fame. I would shun from that kind of fame. But it's a way of getting whatever my take on life, if you like, or the things that concern me are voiced. I'd like to more branch out into my own particular fields of interest, mental health concerns, the state of our nation at the moment, the way that there's a lot of blame culture attached on the very vulnerable in our society, and there are big battles to be fought at the moment in our current society, where there's a huge dichotomy between rich and poor, and we see the distribution of wealth being very skewed towards the upper echelons of society. There's a role to play there through poetry and writing. Similarly, on a broader theme of writing, again, all my little mind will contain is a simple one-page poem. The idea of getting down a big sprawling novel, for instance, is just way outside the realms of my imagination. But who knows, with collaboration or just exploration, that might lead to other things. But yeah, this is where I am now, sat here.
Thank you, Anthony Jones.
Thank you, Peter. It's been a pleasure.